Tuber or not tuber? That is the question. I'm just joking. Today is all about tubers in our sketch titled Tuber Loco, which will cover the prototypic mycobacterial infection, Mycobacteria tuberculosis. As shown in previous sketches, we'll use a tuber, aka potato, anytime that we want you to think of typical mycobacteria, and the title of the sketch should help you recall that we'll be discussing features of tuberculosis. Before we get started, let's break down how this sketch is mashed up. On the left side, we'll discuss the different manifestations that can occur with direct inoculation, while the right side of the sketch will be dedicated to the manifestations owing to endogenous spread. We'll cover the standard treatment of TB at the end along the center of the sketch. So let's get started. First, we'll be discussing the forms of TB that occur via direct inoculation, here on the left. Notice that the buffet reads infused with flavor, to help you recall that these are due to inoculation and not dissemination. Now that we've established that, let's discuss the most common form of cutaneous TB, Tuberculosis Varicosatus. Like the name implies, the lesions are often verrucous in nature and most commonly occur in individuals who have previously had TB and now have been re-inoculated. When I think of doing something twice, I just can't help but think about twice-baked potatoes. Fortunately for me, they also happen to be my number one choice, and I think they look kind of verrucous. Hence why we placed a big old verrucous pile of them here at the start of the buffet. And just in case twice-baked potatoes aren't your number one spud, well, we included a number one foam finger sticker decoration below the tater plate to remind you that this is the number one most common form of cutaneous TB. And you know what? As an added bonus, try to use it to recall that these lesions are often on the hands. Now, as scrumptious as twice-baked taters are, don't fill up, because I hear they've got some delicious fries. That is until this little munchkin decided he poured ketchup all over the entire plate. We've depicted this plate of fries covered in red ketchup to represent a tuberculous chancre, which presents as an ulcerated red papule. Now I know, it's painful to watch such a beautiful mound of deliciousness be ruined, but like this kid's shirt reads, no pain, no gain. Oh, and speaking of no pain, despite being an ulcerated lesion, tuberculous chancres tend to be painless, which can serve as a useful clue on a test. It is worth noting, but not explicitly shown, that unlike tuberculosis varicosatus, chancres typically occur in someone who has not been previously infected and therefore have no immunity. As a result, these lesions are more likely than tuberculosis varicosatus to spread to lymph nodes. Also, it's worth keeping in mind that syphilitic chancres are also painless, and like syphilitic chancres, TB chancres generally take 2 to 4 weeks after exposure to incubate. I was hoping to take some fries home with me, but this dummy ruined them all. Oh, and speaking of takeout, someone forgot theirs next to the number 4 flag. This takeout wrapped in foil like a fancy 2 swan and next to the 4 flag is to remind you of the typical 2 to 4 week incubation time. Now, after you've finished up the main tater course, head on over to the right and get some dessert. Before we check what's on the buffet, note that the forms that result from contiguous spread will be towards the foreground, and as you move down the buffet, this changes to forms resulting from hematogenous spread. You know, I used to think that a potato restaurant might be bland, but like this lady, I would down some sweet potato pie. We've depicted this woman wearing a scarf to remind you of scrofulоderma, which is a purulent form of TB affecting the skin as a result of direct contiguous spread from an underlying infection. A scarf just happens to be perfect because the most common site of underlying infection just happens to be the cervical lymph nodes. In light of recent events, it looks like Tuber Loco has stepped up their reminders about hand hygiene. That's right, you better wash them. Recall that the wash your hands sign is a hook for immunocompromised, and in this case, because patients with scrofulоderma generally have low immunity for one reason or another, be it HIV, primary immunodeficiency, poor nutrition, extremes of age, etc. Oh, now she's got the right idea. Spread some Wolf's famous apple jelly on those taters and pie. Yeah, in case you haven't tried it, apple jelly, or apple butter because I'm not really sure what the difference is amazing on sweet potato pie. And from what they've been saying, Wolf's brand just happens to be the best. Why Wolf's? Well, because the second form of cutaneous TB that results from spread of endogenous infection is Lupus Vulgaris. Oh, sidebar. There's a bunch of lupus and pernio terms and diagnoses to confuse you, but I think that the wolf here will be helpful for you to recall that lupus vulgaris means TB. However, I also think it's helpful to know that vulgaris simply means common. When these conditions were being named and described, TB happened to be the most common cause of facial lesions appearing like this, hence the name Lupus Vulgaris. We added the wolf logo to apple jelly specifically because, like sarcoidosis, Lupus vulgaris will also have an apple jelly color on dioscopy. Oh man, just look at those sweet potato pies. These yummy pies are here to remind you of tuberculous gummas, which result from hematogenous dissemination and clinically may mimic scrofuloderma with ulceration, drainage, and predilection for immunocompromised patients. Take a look at that drainage from the pies. Now that's how you know they're done right. Also, recall that the drainage is to remind you of the drainage that is characteristic of the lesions. Perhaps you're wanting to add a little color to your plate though. Don't worry, just follow the man dressed in his blue navy uniform. By the way, these are referred to as blueberries by the sailors themselves. This military man in his blueberry uniform will represent miliary TB, which again results from hematogenous dissemination and manifests with widespread blue and red-crusted papules. I think the blueberry uniform is probably good enough to recall this, but just in case, we've added some berries inside of these oddly lung-shaped heating trays. Why lung-shaped? Well, because miliary TB generally begins in the lungs before disseminating. Last but not least, let's discuss Orificial Tuberculosis, which is a result of a poorly controlled infection plus direct inoculation. Because it's a mixture of the two methods, but is still considered spread of endogenous infection, we've included the hook with a mouthful of buttery, runny potatoes on the right, but notice that it isn't contiguous with the buffet. Again, this is because unlike other endogenous forms, Orificial TB results from auto-inoculation and not direct or hematologic dissemination. Clinically, it presents close to the mouth with ulcerated lesions and purulent drainage. I hope the mouth stuffed with potatoes and butter running all over will be an adequate hook for this. Now, for all forms of TB, the first-line therapy is generally the tried and true RIPE therapy. If you can't remember all the way back to medical school, RIPE stands for rifampin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. But we'll show the hooks here in the center. With derm mnemonics, we'll use a knight, like this one, for isoniazid. And don't you dare try to smuggle his yams out of here without paying. He's packing a rifampin rifle. I mean, who could blame him? They probably spent hours building that potato pyrazinamide pyramid. Alright, I'll be the first to admit, we struggled with ethambutol. The hook that was proposed several times was well, you get the idea. And as memorable as that was, I just couldn't find a way to work that into a potato sketch. Instead, we chose a ham, for ethambutol, to add a little protein to this carb-filled meal. Now, let's wrap this sketch up in foil and hit the road. This sketch covers the various manifestations of cutaneous tuberculosis and is divided into 3 areas. Forms resulting from direct inoculation on the left buffet, which reads infused with flavor, forms resulting from endogenous dissemination on the right, and treatment in the center. The most common form of TB due to direct inoculation is TB Varicosatus, which occurs in individuals who've been previously exposed, hence the twice-baked potatoes with the number 1 foam finger pointing to them. Clinically, it presents as a verrucous papule, like the verrucous pile of twice-baked potatoes. TB chancre is represented by the ulcer-looking pile of fries covered in ketchup. This usually results in people who have never been exposed and takes 2 to 4 weeks to incubate. That's why we have the 2 swan and 4 flag. Recall that the chancre is painless, as shown by the shirt that reads no pain, no gain. On the right, we've shown forms that result from endogenous spread. At the near end are forms resulting from contiguous spread, while miliary TB and TB gummas result from hematogenous spread. The woman with the scarf represents scrofuloderma, which occurs in immunocompromised patients as a result of spread from underlying lymph nodes to the skin, most commonly the cervical region, which is why the scarf just happens to fit perfectly given the scarf is wrapped around her neck. Lupus vulgaris is shown by the wolf's apple butter because it manifests with red-brown papules and plaques on the face and shows an apple butter color on dioscopy. Tuberculosis gummas are shown by the yummy sweet potato pie, result from hematogenous spread, and manifest with ulcerating deep nodules with purulent drainage, much like the drainage from the pies. Miliary TB is also a manifestation of hematogenous spread and is shown by the military guy wearing his blueberry navy uniform. It manifests with disseminated blue and red papules. The primary infection is generally located in the lungs, which is why we've shown the serving trays as being lung-shaped. Orificial TB is generally considered to be a result of endogenous infection, but it's due to auto-inoculation of someone with poorly controlled TB and manifests with draining orificial lesions near the mouth, much like the buttery drainage coming from the sign with a mouthful of potatoes. In the center of the sketch, we show the treatment, and if you recall from medical school, the treatment of TB is RIPE combination therapy. However, if you don't recall, RIPE stands for rifampin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. These are shown by the rifampin rifle, isoniazid night, pyrazinamide pyramid of potatoes, and the ethambutol ham, respectively. Well, I hope these spuds weren't duds. And if you like the content, hey guys, keep the requests coming, and share derm mnemonics with your friends on social media. Alright, I'll catch you next time.